gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
What is going on, CaneSport? It is Izubee, Charles, and good morning to you all. It is May 9th, 2023, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us on Good Morning CaneSport. Today, I'm joined by Steven Wagner as we break down the news of the day. And Steven, was there news yesterday? Miami was in full effect in portal combat, like John Rossi always says, very active in the transfer portal, landing 2 guys on the offensive side of the ball and 1 on the defensive side of the ball out of Louisiana, and Jadis Richard and Ajay Allen from Nebraska. Steven, let's jump right into it. Ajay Allen, your thoughts on that running back from Nebraska, the true freshman coming from Nebraska to Miami?
Yeah, AJ, I think, is a prospect to really be excited about. In fact, of all the prospects that visited this weekend, probably outside of Tywone Malone, he was probably the prospect that I was the most excited about. This is a kid who was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school and had 4 very positive games early on in the season last year for Nebraska before he got hurt. He injured his collarbone in a loss to Oklahoma in week 4. And so he ended up redshirting for the season, didn't play again. But in those 4 games, he had 33 carries, 190 yards, averaging better than 5 yards a pop. He had a couple of really explosive runs in there as well, played pretty well against Oklahoma. He was steadily getting more and more touches. He was getting more involved in Nebraska's offense. And kind of conceptually, the offense that Nebraska was running last year was kind of a contrast to what Nebraska had traditionally done with kind of that power running offense. You know, they really spread the ball out and they threw it around. Obviously, things didn't work out very well for Nebraska, but conceptually, I think it's actually kind of similar to what Shannon Dawson wants to do at Miami. So I think the fit there is really, really good. I see AJ Allen as a guy who can come in and instantly make the room better. I think he's a guy who, if things go well, he could end up competing for the starting role. He was even able to play in Nebraska's spring game, and I thought he looked, pretty decent. I think there were kind of some issues with the offensive line, kind of learning the new Nebraska system that I think kind of stunted his production and his numbers a little bit in the actual spring game. But overall, I was really excited when Miami landed him. I think he's a guy who, unless you watch a lot of Big Ten football, you probably don't know his name very well, or unless you're kind of a Louisiana recruiting guru, you probably, he's probably not a name that really jumps out at you. But I think that this is a guy who has a lot of really good potential, really good vision, really good speed, very young. And I think he has a really, really nice upside. I think that he is probably the prospect that, or outside of Francisco Malgo and Javion Cohen, I think he's probably the prospect that I've been the most excited about that's transferred in so far.
Yeah, I really like AJ Allen from watching the little glimpse that we had in those 4 games at the beginning of the season. And I saw a Nebraska fan was kind of upset when he first entered the portal, saying, hey, this is our best running back in a long, long time. So really glad to see Miami bring some depth to that running back room. Obviously, we know Don Chaney is a good back, but has those injury issues. And Henry Parrish being that workhorse back, I don't think he has the size or the build to kind of take, 20, 30 carries a game, and Mark Fletcher coming in being a true freshman. So very happy to see Miami add some depth to that running back room. Switching to the defensive side of the ball, Jadis Richard is a guy that Miami brought in as well. Another guy from Louisiana. I saw another thing, the Cajun Canes, a lot of guys from Louisiana coming to Miami. And he's a big defensive back, 6'2", 200 pounds, was a 2-sport athlete in high school, played basketball. When he had his time at Vanderbilt, he did really well. His best game came against the Florida Gators toward the end of the season when they picked up that big upset. And from what I saw from him, watched a little bit of his high school tape, watched a little bit of that Florida game, and some of his things. I really like him. He's a physical cornerback. He's a big cornerback as well. Like I said, 6'2", 200 pounds, and he has 3 years of eligibility left compared to Jaden Davis, who comes in with 1 year. This is a guy that's going to be in the program for the next 2 or 3 years and develop. And when I spoke with him on the phone today, that was his biggest thing. He wants to come into Miami. He wants to develop under Jamil Adai. I know we spoke about that a little bit yesterday morning, but actually seeing him, hey, I'm committed to Miami. I want to come work under Adai. Really glad to see them bring him in. And I know a couple of people are saying, he's coming from Vanderbilt. He was committed to TCU at one point and was also a 4-star recruit. So he is very talented and a guy that Miami recruited in high school as well. So definitely very interested to see how that works out with Jadis Richard coming to Miami. And Steven, another portal transfer that was on campus this weekend in Larry Nixon. You had the chance to catch up with him. Just what were your impressions with that conversation you had?
Yeah, so you can see it in the headline because that was definitely the biggest takeaway. Larry Nixon said Miami's at the top right now. He was really, really high on the Canes coming into the visit. He called them linebacker U. Derek Nicholson, the linebackers coach, has wasted absolutely no time in developing a relationship with him. He's really excited about Miami. He thinks the Canes have a lot to offer. They really impressed him a lot on this visit. He still has a couple of visits left. He's going to visit Auburn and a couple other programs, including Texas Tech and one other program. I can't think off the top of my head who it is. Might be West Virginia. Double check me on that, though. Definitely read the story because I've got all the right information in there. But he's got a couple of visits left. He wants to commit next Saturday. And so I would expect him to really take his time on these visits. I think he wants to sit back. I think he wants to really evaluate things, make sure that he is getting the absolute best deal that he possibly can and that Miami can offer him the most out of any program that he's interested in attending. But right now, Miami 100% in the lead for Larry Nixon. He was really excited coming off of the visit. Miami made a huge impression on him. A lot of really, really good vibes about Larry Nixon. He's a former 3-star recruit. His PFF grade ended up somewhere in the high 70s or around the high 70s, which is a little bit above average. So he kind of seems to be one of those plug and play kind of depth type of guys at the linebacker position. But given the lack of overall depth, or really the youth, I should say, at linebacker right now, Miami needs experience at that spot more than anything. And that's why I think Larry Nixon provides. I think he provides experience. I don't think he's a superstar by any means, but I do think that there's value in kind of the experience that he's going to bring to a position group that is going to be really young this season.
Yeah, so Larry Nixon is definitely another name coming out of this weekend for Canes fan to keep an eye on as we move throughout the week. Kind of jumping from college portal to recruiting, another big-time recruit that was on campus this weekend was 5-star St. Louis University School wide receiver Ryan Wingo. He was one of the many, many recruits on campus this weekend. And when I spoke with him yesterday, he pretty much told me this was the best trip he's had to Miami. He visited once in June during the Legends Camp, I believe. Obviously, when you're at the Legends Camp, there's thousands of kids there, so not as much attention focused on you. But the biggest thing, what he told me out of taking away everything, was just the Miami coaching staff, how genuine they were, how upbeat they were, how excited they were to have him. And one cool thing that he told me as well, he kind of thought, obviously, when kids go on recruiting trips, coaches are just doing this because I'm here, or they're just trying to impress me. But he spoke with Ray Joseph, and Ray said, listen, this is how the coaches are 24/7. They don't sugarcoat anything. This is their personality. And that is the biggest thing he kind of took away from this whole trip. Ryan Wingo is obviously one of the top receivers, top prospects in the 2024 class. It was really good to see him come out to Miami. One of the biggest reasons he told me he wanted to come out here was to meet Coach Kevin Beard, and he did have that opportunity to sit down and talk with Coach Kevin Beard. In that conversation, he said Coach Kevin Beard wasn't really selling him a recruiting pitch, was instead of kind of showing him, hey, we can develop you. This is what we can do with you. This is what we want to do with you if you want to come to Miami. And that was kind of something that took him by surprise a little bit, because obviously when you're a big-time recruit, you're going to these programs. Coaches are selling anything they can to you, and he said Miami really didn't do that, and that's something that he really, really liked. So if you haven't checked out that story on Ryan Wingo, make sure to give that a read. And Steven, I wanted to ask you, wrapping up this whole, I know we're 2 days removed from this big recruiting weekend, what would you grade this weekend for Miami, leaving with 2 commitments and, leaving a good impression on a handful of guys as well?
I'd give it a good solid A-, mostly because of the progress that they seem to make with Ryan Wingo. Miami had kind of fallen off of Wingo's radar, if we're being totally honest. Georgia had been surging, Tennessee had been surging. Notre Dame is also a program that's up there. That's up there for him on the RPM. He's got an official visit set to Missouri. It really looked like a lot of these SEC powers had kind of taken the reins in his recruitment and had really kind of assumed control of this. And I really thought to myself, it looks like he's probably kind of a long shot for Miami. But after this weekend, it doesn't seem like that's the case in the short term, at least. Now, whether this is actually whether Miami actually has gained some momentum and is going to become a serious player for Wingo, I think that's probably going to take maybe 2 or 3 weeks to really find out, because as we've seen before, the post-visit high is a very real effect, and sometimes after a week and a half or so, it can kind of wear off for a lot of these guys. And what it can also do is whenever a guy like Ryan Wingo has, this really awesome visit to Miami and he's telling everyone about how great it is, well, some of these other programs that have been recruiting him really hard, like Georgia and Tennessee, they're going to see that and they're going to go, okay, what are we doing wrong? What is Miami doing that we're not? Because we thought we were in a really good position with him. Now, what do we need to change to make sure that we keep Miami from becoming a player, that we maintain the lead? That's something that we saw earlier this cycle with David Stone. David Stone came to Miami. He was ranting and raving. And I thought to myself, as he was walking away, I was thinking to myself, like, man, this feels like Miami's like in an awesome spot with this guy. It's starting to feel like Miami's going to get this kid. Well, a week and a half, 2 weeks go by, and here comes Oklahoma. Oklahoma totally regains that momentum, and Oklahoma has kept that momentum. And then Michigan State, the program that was right behind Oklahoma before his Miami visit, Michigan State comes right back into the picture, and they're kind of maintaining their spot that they'd previously held. So basically, the post-visit momentum is a very, very real thing, but the danger of it is that it almost always wears off. It will wear off in a certain period of time, but whether or not this becomes something that whether or not this becomes something that actually ends up making a serious difference in Miami's recruiting, or in Miami's recruitment of Ryan Wingo, that's going to take a little bit of time to really find out, because as we've also seen, when Miami really, really locks in on a guy, it's pretty hard for that player to keep them off their radar. So give it a couple weeks, then we'll kind of see where things still sit and if Miami can really take advantage of the situation they put themselves in.
Yeah, I feel like Miami really kind of boosted themselves up his list. I know when I asked him, I was like, hey, where does Miami rank right now? He's like, you know what? I really don't have any rankings for a school, but I do want to come back. And I asked him what it'd be for an OV. He says, hey, I'm not too sure about that, but that's something in the works. So make sure to check out all our recruiting stories on this past weekend in Miami. Also, this past weekend was a Kentucky Derby where a former University of Miami alum horse won that race, and we have a pretty unique story on that as well. So make sure to check that out. Also on the site this morning, we continue our countdown from 50 to 1. We're at number 45 with Logan Sacapolo. So make sure to check that out as well on the site. Switching to recruiting news, Miami continued to hand out a bunch of offers, and the latest offer came from Southern California 2024 quarterback Bear Bachmeier. Bear Bachmeier is one of the best quarterbacks in the 2025 class. I believe he's the number 10 ranked quarterback in that class, and he's really, really talented. One funny thing, when I was interviewing, he wears number 47 as a quarterback, and I was like, is this like a punter or something? He's like, no, I'm a quarterback. That's just something that I do for fun. Shannon Dawson went down there and offered him, and if you turn on his tape, he's a very, very good quarterback, runs the RPO, very good with his legs, dual threat, and you can kind of see that's the type of quarterback Shannon Dawson wants to bring into this offense, a guy that can get it done in the air, on the ground as well. So make sure to check out that interview and story with Bear Bachmeier. I think you guys really, really like him once you turn on that tape and see what he's all about. Another offer that Miami gave out went to junior college tight end Connor Gilbreth. Steven, you had a chance to speak with him a little bit. Just talk to me about your impressions from that conversation and, where Miami really stands with this guy.
Yeah, he's a guy. Miami is going to be recruiting him as a 2024 player. He said that Cody Woodell, Miami's tight ends coach, had been talking to or had told him that they would take him at either offensive lineman or tight end. So important to note that he is definitely a blocking tight end. That's really his identity. Had some success at the junior college level, but hadn't really been a huge recruit before he got that Miami offer. He said, through a lot of the season, the only team that offered him was Portland State. So we're not even talking about an FBS offer here. But his recruitment has picked up recently. He started getting some of those. FBS offers. I personally think Miami's kind of one of the bigger programs that is coming for him right now. I believe he also has a Washington offer and a couple of Pac-12 schools. So he's definitely a guy who would be viewed, I think, in probably like a Cam McCormick type of position where, he's really used sort of as the H-back, really one of those guys where, you put him in and you understand, okay, well, they're going to want to do something that involves running, because you watch his game tape. He's a really good blocker. He's really physical. He's attacking. He's downhill. He's got really good size too. So I think that there is a lot of, I think that he definitely has a pretty solid amount of potential. The first thing that kind of popped off to me, or the first thing that really kind of stood out to me whenever he told me they picked up the offer, was that he was going to be a 2024 guy, because a lot of the time you don't see junior college guys offered in the spring unless the program wants them to be an addition for the fall. But this is a guy who's being offered in the spring, where Miami would take him in the class of 2024, and they probably wouldn't take him, or they would probably end up taking him as a spring 2024 enrollee. So definitely loop him in with that 2024 class. We'll kind of see how things end up shaking out over there. But Connor Gilbreth could be kind of one of those sneaky names to watch to kind of keep on the radar a little bit.
Yeah, it looks like Miami's trying to get in there early before, other Power 5 programs start to see that Mr. Gilbreth's talents and, really pick up his recruitment. So they love to see Miami hopping on those guys early. Well, that's all that we have for this episode of Good Morning CaneSport. A ton of coverage on our site, from transfer portal to recruiting and much, much more. So stay tuned for anything that might come up this morning as well. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles, and thank you all for watching. Have a great rest of your day.